Welcome to another episode of Philosophy for Flourishing. I'm Craig Biddle, and I'm joined by my colleague John Hersey. Today, and we're filming this on January 11, we want to talk about the start of the new year, just on a personal level. We're going to set aside all the chaos going on politically and focus on how to think about, or some ideas for thinking about, how to make 2021 one of your best years ever in life. And at the start of the year, everybody's thinking about New Year's resolutions or how to keep the New Year's resolutions that they've already set for themselves. And I love this time of year because it gets everybody thinking about self-improvement, which is almost invariably what people's New Year's resolutions are about. And I think that that is a profoundly good and indeed moral thing to do, is to make your life the best it can be. So this is a subject near and dear to my heart. John, what do you make of this time of year and how people might make the most of their lives by thinking about things deeply now?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to think deeply about now, but like you said, we'll keep this on the personal level. And I think one of the important things that gets overlooked is pride. Pride is what Aristotle called the crown of the virtues. And Ayn Rand said that man is a being of self-made soul, that pride is viewing oneself as one's own highest value. And this, of course, is the product of self-esteem. Self-esteem is the result of creating your own character, creating a character that you believe is good, that you can be proud of. So while we're thinking about what we want to achieve in the new year, I think it's good to have this idea front and center. We should be thinking about this as well. What do we want to do to carve our own character and just to be the best versions of ourselves? So, this ties into a whole bunch of things, but, the biggest, and I think this is what relates it back to what most people are thinking about this time of year, is that pride is largely the result of productivity, of creating a real life-serving values in the world. And so it's not something that's disconnected from these other values. It's by and large the result of these other values that we set ourselves out to achieve. And we ought to take the time to appreciate our own achievements in this moral sense as well.
Yeah, agreed. Pride is such an interesting virtue because it's not one of the virtues that's shared by all philosophies and religions. I mean, almost every philosophy and religion says, you should be honest, you should be just, and then they define these things differently. You should have integrity, but pride, not so much. Pride is regarded by many religions and even some philosophies as a sin. And I love the way that Ayn Rand puts together, in fact, it's one of my favorite phrases of her, the way that she describes pride. She says it's moral ambitiousness. And this combination of words is really rich if you think about it, because, ambition, people mostly know what ambition is. It's the desire or the intent to succeed in something, right? That's a sort of stringent effort or desire to accomplish something. And normally that is not seen as a particularly moral thing. It might be seen as a prudent thing, right? Sure, you want to do well in your business venture because that will enable you to live well. But what does that have to do with morality on the traditional conception of morality, which is that people should sacrifice for others, right? That's the altruist code, and the highest moral virtue in altruism is self-sacrifice in service of others. And Rand, of course, sweeps all that aside and says, well, wait, that doesn't make any sense. The only reason we need morality to begin with is so that we can think long range and wide range about the requirements of our life so that we can live. So she puts these things together and says that, to borrow from Aristotle, the crown of the virtues is moral ambitiousness, being principled. The moral side is being super principled and focused and intentional with the moral fervor that comes with the idea that you really should make your life the best it can be. And then you combine that with ambitiousness, this idea of really going after the things in your life that will make your life great. And that combination to me is one of the most important things Rand did, because it really encapsulates her whole view of morality in two words. The moral part, obviously, is for her acting in a self-interested, value-pursuing manner rather than a value-sacrificing manner, and doing that on principled grounds all the time. And then she links that with ambitiousness, this idea of achieving your highest goals in life and really going after what will make your life wonderful. And as you indicated, this is like an MO that you can have. It's like a modus operandi that you can adopt. And if you think about this in conjunction with whatever your other goals are for 2021, this can be sort of the underlying guidance that you can adopt to say to yourself regularly, am I really being principled in the way that I can make my life the best it can be? And this, a lot of people think, oh, being selfish is easy. It's really easy. You just kind of do whatever you want. That's just not the case. Doing whatever you want is not going to bring you a beautiful, wonderful life. How do you get that? It requires this enormous amount of thinking, this enormous amount of planning, and then dealing with the difficulties of life as you try to enact those things. So I love this idea as sort of the foundation for thinking about self-improvement at this time of year.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out, that, because I sort of skipped over that most moral codes don't think that pride is a virtue. And Rand's achievement, her objective secular morality, enables us to see the connection between the things that most people are already going after at the beginning of the year and morality. Because without that, on the standard view, you lose that. You might think, well, yeah, I'm going to go out and achieve all these goals, but these are really just for me. I'm just achieving things that I want. So this really has nothing to do with building my moral character. And Rand says exactly the opposite. And without that viewpoint, we can't really appreciate what it is that we're doing at the same level.
Yeah, it's really it's an integration of the moral and the practical, right? In the usual way that Rand goes about making such integrations, right? She takes false alternatives and busts them up and puts two things together that would not normally be seen as going together and says, no, they do go together. Moral principles and your self-improvement and wonderful life are one is the means, the other is the end.
And I think that, I want to offer a couple thoughts on bringing this idea down to the concrete. Because, man is a being of self-made soul, and you've got to build your moral character. These are ideas to live by, but then how do you do so? And one of the things that obviously most people do and most people recommend is to think long-term and broad range about what your goals are, what you want to achieve in your life, and to do something like establish your 10, your 20, your 50-year goals, and then reverse engineer. How do I get from where I am to there? And I definitely recommend that. I think that's a great practice. But it's also extremely difficult. And I think that it can be supplemented with something that can help a bit. If you go from the other side and you say about the things that you're currently doing, are these things adding to my pride? Are these things good? Are these things value creating? Are these creating life-serving values? And to ask yourself about each thing, are there any aspects of this thing that I'm doing currently that is an end in itself? And is that why I'm doing it? Are there aspects of it that are just a means to another end? And if so, are there other means to achieve that end? And are there things that I really dislike? And is part of why I dislike them maybe something that I think reflects on my moral character? Perhaps it does, and now's a good time to get that on the table, to be really clear-headed about what you're currently doing and what aspects of it you do and don't like, and how that impinges on how you see yourself as a person.
Yeah, there's this is hardly novel. I mean, a lot of people talk about this, but I think it's worth emphasizing in this context that one of the most important things to do to figure out how to make your future better is to pay serious attention to what your past has been. Like, what have you been doing? Look back, and you look back at your past, few months, your past year, and say, how did I spend my time? And take seriously the business of identifying what you've done and whether or not you think that was the best use of your time. There are several things that you get from this. One positive thing you get from this is you get to reflect on the good things that you've done. I mean, presumably we've all done some really, really good things, and you want to take note of those because they help you. They fuel your self-esteem. They fuel your desire to do more of those kinds of things as well. But it also gives you a check, because if you've been spending an inordinate amount of time on social media and you know that that's not really the best way to make your life great, you want to know that you've done that so that you can make a mental note to actually change this moving forward. So I love the idea of reflecting, taking a moment, a substantial period of time actually, at the beginning of a year like this, to think clearly and honestly about what you have done in the past year. Tim Ferriss has a method that he uses for this, where he draws a line down a page and he says, list the great things that happened on one side and list the negative things that happened on the other side, including the people and the events and everything. And then, to make short work of his idea here, after you get everything down, the goal is to try to put more of the good things on the New Year's calendar, and make sure that you take the bad things and make sure they're not on your calendar. Make a do not do list out of those things. Don't hang out with these people who are not good for my life. Don't get involved in these projects that are pulling me away from these more important projects. So I love that. And another way to get serious about thinking at a concrete level about this, there's another way you can think about this too. That Dan Sullivan talks a lot about the gap and the gain, right? And we've talked about this before on the podcast. And the gain is when you look back and you see what you've gained, how much you've done. And the gap is what's in front of you. It's sort of you're striving for these ideals, and there's always this big gap in front of you. And you first want to look at your gains so that you know what has actually happened, and you get to enrich your soul on the basis of reviewing the good things you've done, and also identify the things that need to change. Then you look forward and you want to make a plan on the basis of that. And then, and this is where Rand's idea comes in, take that seriously. Take your life and your happiness seriously. Don't just make these plans and let it go. If you've decided, as I'll concretize it for me, I eat pretty well generally because we try, or at least insofar as I understand what good nutrition is. I mean, that's a moving target, and it's hard to know, especially if you're an amateur and a layman like me in the field. I can't read all the reports that come out, but from my understanding of nutrition, I hold, and it seems to suit me, that eating high protein, lots of fat, vegetables, and a little bit of fruit here and there is good, and staying away from carbs and especially sugar. Well, I had cut out almost all sugar from my life, but this year I've decided to literally just cut it. I'm not going to eat sugar unless it comes in fruit, right? And my evening glass of wine gets to be included in the fruit because that comes from grapes. So whether that's cheating or not, we could debate. But the point is, now I have decided to take sugar out of my diet and to do it absolutely. That I'm just not going to eat anything that has cane sugar in it. And the thing that I can bring to the table with this is, again, the moral ambitiousness. Is this good for me? Yes, I've already determined that. So we could debate whether I'm right in that determination, but I think it is good. Should I then make it extremely, should I be extremely adamant about and sort of take on moral principle the idea that, hey, you made this decision, Biddle, now you're going to do this thing? Yeah, and this is a really simple, low-level point here. I'm not, we could also talk about, I'm going to write a book this year or something like that. I'm just trying to make it a simple thing, for example, here, because if you do take your life, your health, your happiness, and all of these things seriously, you want to put this in principled moral terms, and I think you can do that by combining the importance of looking back, the importance of looking forward, and then the importance of bringing principles, moral principles, to bear on making your life awesome.
Yeah, one more thought on this, and it relates back to pride. So pride, viewing oneself as one's own highest value. What does Rand mean in this instance by value, or what does Rand mean by value more generally? She means that which we act to gain or keep, that which we act to gain or keep. And I think that's a pretty unique view. I think that the average person on the street, when they think about what they value, they think about what they have some sort of emotional commitment to, the things that they generally like. But this is a far more disciplined view of value. And on this view, the things that you don't act to gain or keep are things that you don't actually value. So I think if you sit down and do this sort of retrospective look that Tim Ferriss recommends, what you'll see is the things that you actually valued over the year. And then you can say, well, I did value these things. I did act to gain and or keep them. But do these things actually line up with my ideas about what I should value? And if not, then how can I make 2021 be more about the things that I really do value?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'll use an example that I used in an article I wrote on Rand's ethics. We all know that if a parent says to a child, look, you've left your bicycle out in the rain, for weeks on end, it's all rusty, clearly you don't value the bicycle, right? And we know that that's true. When the parent says that, it's true that the child does not value the bicycle. It doesn't matter if the child comes back and says, but I do, I love that bicycle. I really do love that bicycle. It's enormously important to me. The fact of the matter is that if it were genuinely of value, he would have acted differently. And so, this is a fine but important point on Rand's use of the concept of value. A value is not just that which you want or that which you desire or that which you wish you could have. Those are called dreams or emotions, or they take different or there are different terms that can describe what these things are, but they are not values unless you act to gain and keep them. And there's even common parlance that speaks to this, such as you don't value that bicycle, and I think that's a good way to think of it. Ayn Rand's entire philosophy is based on this idea too. We don't need to get into all of this today, but she goes all the way down to the whole purpose of values. The whole reason that values exist is that they are precisely the actions we take toward the goals that can keep us alive and enable us to flourish. So there's a whole lot of depth that you can get into with all of this. But just at the general level for thinking about how to make your life great and how to make 2021 a wonderful year for you, my recommendation for you and me and anyone listening here is don't just think strategically or tactically about the things you're going to do this year. Also, make it a moral issue. Make it an issue of moral ambitiousness. Think to yourself, hey, if I'm going to take my life and my happiness seriously, why not put this in moral terms? Why not adopt the idea that I'm going to be morally ambitious? I'm going to be principled in my ambition. See if that helps. I think it will.
One other recommendation, Craig, you wrote a great article on this topic that we'll link to in the show notes. I think it's titled Purpose, Value, Hierarchies, and Happiness. And also, of course, your book, Loving Life, The Morality of Self-Interest and the Facts That Support It. And you can get a free copy of that. Just look at the show notes for details on how to do that.
Let me point out two additional things to read, where Rand discusses the idea of pride being described as moral ambitiousness. That's in the Objectivist Ethics, in her wonderful book, The Virtue of Selfishness. But also, John, your powerful article on Benjamin Franklin is a great article to read on this count. Benjamin Franklin, although he didn't use the concept of moral ambitiousness, he clearly took self-development seriously and regarded it, I think, as a moral issue, as the right way to live, is to really take your values seriously. And you had that wonderful, what did you title that article? I actually am drawing a blank on remembering that.
It's called Benjamin Franklin, the Enlightenment Personified.
That's right. Yeah, let's link to that in the show notes as well, because that's a super good article. And he, as you point out in there, he was kind of like the father of the self-development movement, in the good sense of that thing being a movement. So
absolutely. Yeah, I'm now I'm tempted to go into a whole nother rabbit hole of great things about Franklin, but he developed a system for achieving moral perfection, which is a wonderful thing to try to achieve. And it reminds me that these days there's actually an app on the App Store that you can use to kind of mimic his system digitally. So check that out.
Yeah. Well, since you brought up Franklin, you and Andrew Bernstein did a show on Franklin, did you not, on the Hero Show?
Yeah, episode 2, I think it was, of the Hero Show was on Benjamin Franklin, and I had such fun doing that show. Unfortunately, the audio was a little bit crappy because we were still kind of figuring out how things worked, but I think that the content's good enough that if people are interested in Franklin, you ought to check that out and bear with it nonetheless. The ideas are really good.
Sounds good. All right, well, thanks everyone for listening. I hope your 2021 is your best year to date. As Picard would say, make it so. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Philosophy for Flourishing. In the meantime, let your friends know about this show and review our show. I don't know. I haven't been paying attention to whether we even ever get reviewed. I hope we do. But if you're enjoying this show and would like to help us to do better in the algorithms, as they say, go ahead and give us a review. We'd love to hear what you think. And with that, we'll say take care and we'll see you next time.